The Corvani refugee ship Eternal Dawn limped through the void, its hull scarred by plasma burns and meteor impacts. Captain Zarathek stood on the bridge, her forearms trembling as she watched the tactical display. Behind them, somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Dracari Armada hunted them with cold efficiency. "Captain, we're losing power to the secondary engines," reported her chief engineer, his voice tight with exhaustion. They had been running for 3 months, jumping from system to system, always one step ahead of extinction. The Dracari had swept through their home worlds like a plague of metal and fire. 12 billion Corvani had lived on the 3 worlds of their small empire. Now fewer than 2 million survived, scattered across a dozen refugee ships fleeing through space. The Corvani had committed no crime except existing in a region the Dracari wanted to control. "How long until we reach the next system?" Zarathek asked her navigator. 6 hours, Captain. But our fuel reserves. The navigator's scales shifted from blue to worried gray. "We won't make it much further." Zarathek closed her eyes and felt the weight of 40,000 lives aboard her ship. Families huddled in cargo holds. Children who had never known a sky that wasn't made of metal. Elders who remembered the great cities of Corvani Prime before the bombardment turned them to glass. "What's in this next system?" she asked. Her science officer consulted his instruments. Designation Sol 3. A single star with multiple planets. The 3rd planet shows signs of a young civilization. They've achieved basic spaceflight, but haven't expanded beyond their home system. Technology level? Primitive by our standards. Chemical rockets, basic fusion power, electromagnetic communications. They call themselves humans. Zarathek nodded slowly. They had encountered dozens of such species during their flight. Most had turned them away, too frightened of bringing Dracari attention upon themselves. Others had offered minimal aid before hurrying them along. She couldn't blame them. The Dracari showed no mercy to those who helped their enemies. "Are they hostile?" she asked. "Unknown. Their communications suggest they're divided into multiple political groups, but they've shown some cooperative behavior in space exploration. They have a small orbital station around their moon." The ship shuddered as another system failed. Warning lights bathed the bridge in red. They were out of options and out of time. "Set course for the human system," Zarathek commanded. "Send a general distress signal on all frequencies. We'll approach slowly and hope they don't shoot first." The Eternal Dawn dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, its engines barely functional. Within minutes, their sensors detected movement from the inner system. The humans had noticed them. "Captain, we're receiving transmissions," the communications officer announced. "Multiple sources, all from the 3rd planet." "What are they saying?" "They're asking if we need help." Zarathek's mandibles clicked in surprise. Not demands to leave or threats of force. An offer of assistance. She had encountered many species during the war, but few had led with compassion. "Open a channel," she ordered. The view screen flickered to life, showing a human face. The creature was bipedal, with soft features and small eyes. It wore some kind of uniform with symbols Zarathek didn't recognize. "This is Admiral Chun of the United Earth Space Command," the human said. "We've detected damage to your vessel. Do you require assistance?" Zarathek stepped forward, her forearms spread in the universal gesture of peace her people had taught the galaxy before the war. "I am Captain Zarathek of the Corvani vessel Eternal Dawn," she replied. "We are refugees fleeing the Dracari Armada. Our ship is badly damaged, and our supplies are nearly exhausted. We have 40,000 civilians aboard, including 12,000 children." She watched the human's face carefully, waiting for the inevitable change when beings realized what it meant to help Corvani refugees. The fear, the calculation, the polite rejection. Instead, Admiral Chen leaned forward. 40,000? That's a lot of people. Are there medical emergencies?" "Some of our wounded are in critical condition," Zarathek admitted. "But, Admiral, I must warn you. The Dracari will eventually track us here. Helping us puts your world at risk." The human was quiet for a moment, and Zarathek prepared herself for disappointment. Then, Admiral Chen nodded. "We can't leave 40,000 people to die in space," he said simply. "I'm authorizing emergency docking at Luna Station. We'll begin transferring medical supplies immediately." "You don't understand," Zarathek insisted. "The Dracari Armada has ships that could devastate your planet. They've destroyed entire civilizations for helping us." Admiral Chen's expression hardened. "How long do we have?" "It's hard to say. Perhaps weeks, perhaps months. But they will come." The human nodded again. "Then, we'd better get started. Can your ship make it to lunar orbit?" Zarathek felt her heart's racing. You're still willing to help? Even knowing what it might cost. 40,000 people, Admiral Chen repeated. Including children. That's not a political calculation, Captain. That's basic decency. As the Eternal Dawn limped toward the human moon, Zarathek found herself amazed by what she saw through her sensors. The humans had only achieved spaceflight recently, but they were already building orbital platforms, asteroid mining operations, and what appeared to be a large construction facility at the edge of their system. Luna Station was larger than she had expected, capable of docking ships far bigger than anything she had seen humans build. When she mentioned this to Admiral Chun, he smiled grimly. We've always been optimistic about making friends out here, he said. Better to build too big than too small. The docking process took 6 hours, with human engineers working alongside Corvani technicians to adapt the station's systems. Zarathek watched in fascination as the two species found ways to communicate despite language barriers and completely different technologies. Dr. Sarah Martinez led the medical team that boarded the Eternal Dawn. She was a small human with graying hair and intense eyes that reminded Zarathek of her own species' healers. How many wounded? Dr. Martinez asked as they walked through the refugee quarters. 347 with serious injuries, Zarathek replied. Many more with malnutrition and stress-related conditions. Dr. Martinez nodded, already making notes on a handheld device. We'll need to set up temporary medical facilities. Our biology is different, but trauma is trauma. We'll figure it out. They passed through sections of the ship where families had made homes from cargo containers and emergency shelters. Children with scales ranging from emerald to deep blue played games with improvised toys. Adults tended to small gardens growing in makeshift hydroponic space. Despite everything, the Corvani had maintained their culture and dignity. How long have you been running? Dr. Martinez asked. 94 days since we left Corvani space, Zarathek answered. But our people have been at war for 2 years. What started it? Zarathek's scales shifted to the deep purple of old sadness. The Dracari Empire decided they needed our star systems for strategic resources. They demanded we evacuate our home worlds within 1 solar rotation. When we refused, they began orbital bombardment. Dr. Martinez stopped walking. They gave you less than a year to abandon your home. They gave us 37 of your days. The human doctor's face went through several expressions before settling on determined anger. And when you said no, they just started killing civilians? The Dracari don't see other species as truly intelligent, Zarathek explained. To them, we're animals that have learned to use tools. They feel no more guilt about eliminating us than you would about clearing pests from a garden. Dr. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Then, she looked directly at Zarathek with those intense eyes. Well, they picked the wrong garden this time. Over the next 3 days, the humans worked with remarkable efficiency. Medical teams treated wounded Corvani using adapted human equipment and improvised techniques. Engineering crews repaired the Eternal Dawn's critical systems, while their scientists studied Corvani technology with eager curiosity. But it was the small gestures that surprised Zarathek most. Human children drew pictures to give to young Corvani. Families donated clothing that was then adapted to fit four-armed bodies. Restaurants prepared special meals using Corvani dietary requirements that had been hastily researched and translated. Why are you doing this? Zarathek asked Admiral Chun as they watched human and Corvani engineers working together to repair the refugee ship's main engine. Because it's right, he answered simply. And because I have a daughter about the age of some of your kids. I can't imagine her being forced to run from her home and not finding help when she needed it. But your species barely knows spaceflight. The Dracari have conquered half the galaxy. You're risking everything for strangers. Admiral Chun turned to look at her. Captain, my species spent thousands of years fighting wars over territory, resources, and ideology. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times. But we learned something important. When you stand by and watch innocent people get slaughtered because it's convenient or safe, you lose part of what makes you human. He gestured toward the work crews below. These people aren't thinking about galactic politics or military strategy. They see families in trouble, and they're helping because that's who we are. On the 4th day, as repairs to the Eternal Dawn neared completion, long-range sensors detected the first Dracari scout ships entering the outer system. Admiral Chun immediately called a meeting with his senior staff and Zarathek. How long before they arrive in force? Admiral Chun asked. The scouts will report back to the main fleet, Zarathek explained. They'll want to confirm we're here and assess your defenses. Probably 2 weeks before the Armada arrives. How many ships? A full Dracari Armada consists of 120 vessels, 30 battle cruisers, 60 destroyers, and 30 support ships. Each battle cruiser can destroy a planet's surface in hours. The human officers exchanged glances. Admiral Chun rubbed his chin thoughtfully. And they'll demand we turn you over? They'll demand you surrender my people for immediate execution, Zarathek said quietly. If you refuse, they'll destroy your orbital installations and bombard your planet until you comply. How long would it take to evacuate your people to another system? Zarathek felt her hopes crumble. She had known this moment would come. The humans had been generous beyond measure, but they had their own species to protect. With our repairs, perhaps 4 days to reach the next inhabited system, she said. I understand. You've done more than enough. We're grateful for. That's not what I meant, Admiral Chen interrupted. I'm asking because I want to know if we have time to prepare proper defenses for you. Zarathek stared at him. Defenses? Against a Dracari Armada? Captain, I've spent the last 4 days watching your people and mine work together. I've seen Corvani engineers solve problems our best minds couldn't crack. I've watched your doctors teach ours new techniques. Your artists have already created works that hang in our museums. He leaned forward. 40,000 people. 40,000 perspectives, skills, stories, and dreams. That's not cargo to be passed along to the next system. That's irreplaceable treasure. Admiral, you don't understand what you're facing. The Dracari have destroyed entire star systems. Your ships can't. Our ships today can't match them, Admiral Chen agreed. But we have 2 weeks, and the most motivated workforce in human history. Plus some very interesting Corvani technology that our engineers are extremely excited about. Zarathek felt her legs grow weak. She sat down heavily in the human chair, which creaked under her four-armed frame. You're going to fight them, she whispered. You're actually going to fight the Dracari Armada to protect us. We're going to fight them to protect our friends, Admiral Chen corrected. Because that's what you are now. Family doesn't abandon family. As news of the coming battle spread throughout Luna Station and down to Earth, Zarathek witnessed something she had never seen before. Instead of panic or anger at their government for taking such a risk, the humans rallied. Factories retooled overnight to produce military equipment. Scientists abandoned long-term projects to focus on immediate defense needs. Citizens volunteered for whatever roles they could fill. The most remarkable thing was how naturally humans and Corvani began working together. Language barriers dissolved as both species developed rapid translation protocols. Human intuitive problem-solving combined with Corvani technical precision created solutions neither could have achieved alone. Dr. Martinez approached Zarathek on the 6th day with a proposal that left her speechless. We want to offer citizenship to any Corvani who want to stay permanently, the doctor said. Not as refugees, but as full members of human society. You mean some might remain even after the crisis? I mean, we're hoping most will choose to make Earth their new home. We've learned more in the past week than we had in decades of research. But, more than that, your people have shown us what we could become when we reach the stars. Zarathek walked through the expanded quarters that humans had built for Corvani families. Children of both species played together, teaching each other games and sharing stories. Adults collaborated on everything from art projects to engineering challenges. This is what the galaxy could have been, she murmured to Dr. Martinez. If the Dracari hadn't spread their poison of supremacy and conquest. It's what it still could be, Dr. Martinez replied. Starting here. That night, Zarathek called a meeting of all Corvani ship captains and community leaders. She faced 2,000 of her people in Luna Station's main assembly hall, with Admiral Chun standing beside her. My friends, she began, her voice carrying through the translation systems, we stand at a crossroads. In 8 days, the Dracari Armada will arrive to reclaim us for execution. The humans have offered us a choice. She gestured to Admiral Chun. They will fight to defend us, asking nothing in return except that we stand with them as equals. Or they will help us continue our flight to other systems, with their blessing and whatever supplies they can spare. An elder named Kethmore stood up. His scales were the silver of advanced age, and his voice commanded respect. Young captain, he said, I have lived through the rise and fall of 3 Corvani governments. I've seen our people adapt to challenges that would break other species. But I have never seen anything like what these humans have shown us. He turned to address the crowd. They knew the risk from the moment we arrived. They could have sent us away with minimal supplies and clear consciences. Instead, they opened their homes, shared their knowledge, and offered their lives for our protection. Another Corvani, an engineer named Siraven, called out, but can they actually defeat the Dracari? We've seen what those monsters can do. Admiral Chen stepped forward. I won't lie to you. The Dracari fleet outguns us significantly with current technology. But we have advantages they don't expect. We have your knowledge combined with human determination. We have 2 weeks to prepare defenses they've never encountered. And, most importantly, we're fighting for something they can't understand. Which is, asked Kethmore. The right of intelligent beings to live free from tyranny, Admiral Chen replied. The Dracari fight to expand their empire. We'll be fighting for the survival of everything we've built together. Zarathek watched the faces of her people as they considered their options. She saw fear, certainly, but also something else. Hope. For the first time since the war began, they had found allies who valued them as equals rather than burdens. Young Vortel, barely past adolescence, stood up. Captain, if we run now, we'll always be running. The Dracari will hunt us until they find us, or until we find somewhere so far from civilization that we might as well be dead. His scales brightened to the blue of determination. But if we stay and fight with the humans, maybe we can start something new. Maybe we can build the kind of galaxy our children deserve. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. When the vote came, it was nearly unanimous. The Corvani would stay and fight alongside their human protectors. As the assembly dispersed, Zarathek found herself standing alone with Admiral Chun, looking out at Earth through the station's massive viewport. Are you sure about this? She asked him. Your species has never faced anything like the Dracari. Admiral Chun smiled, and for a moment he reminded her of her own father, who had died defending their home world. Captain, my people have a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We've done a lot of stupid things in our history, but we've never been good at backing down from bullies. Even when the bullies have overwhelmingly superior firepower. Especially then, Admiral Chen replied. That's when the fight matters most. As they watched Earth turn slowly below them, its blue oceans and white clouds unmarred by war, Zarathek felt something she had almost forgotten. She felt hope. Admiral Chen stood in the center of Earth's newly constructed war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the solar system's defensive preparations. Representatives from every major nation sat around the circular table, while Corvani technical advisors worked alongside human scientists at workstations throughout the facility. Status report, Chen requested, his voice carrying the weight of command that had been thrust upon him when the United Nations unanimously voted him Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces. General Rodriguez from the Americas Federation stood first. Industrial output is at maximum capacity. Every factory that can produce military hardware has been retooled. We're manufacturing ships and weapons at rates that shouldn't be possible. How are we managing that? Asked Prime Minister Singh from the Asian Alliance. Dr. Elizabeth Warren from the European Space Consortium answered, Corvani manufacturing techniques are incredibly efficient. Their molecular assembly processes allow us to build components at the atomic level. We're essentially printing starships now. Zarathek, who had been granted an advisory position in the defense planning, clicked her mandibles in what humans had learned was amusement. Your species' adaptability continues to amaze us. It took the Corvani 3 centuries to develop those techniques. You've mastered them in 10 days. Desperation is a powerful motivator, Admiral Chen replied. What about ship numbers? Colonel Park from the Pacific Coalition consulted her tablet. We've completed 43 destroyers using hybrid human Corvani designs. Another 27 are in final assembly. The new dreadnought will be ready for testing tomorrow. 1 dreadnought against 30 Dracari battle cruisers, muttered Director Petrov from the Northern European Union. I hope our other preparations are more promising. Chief Engineer Marcus Thompson, who had become the primary liaison between human and Corvani technical teams, stepped forward with barely contained excitement. Actually, sir, I think you'll be pleased with what we've accomplished. The Corvani energy shielding technology, combined with our own advances in fusion power, has created defensive capabilities the Dracari have never encountered. He activated a holographic display showing Luna Station. We've turned the moon into a fortress. Orbital platforms with Corvani plasma cannons powered by human fusion reactors. The firepower output is approximately 4 times what either species could achieve alone. Dr. Amara Okafor, Earth's leading physicist, added her own report. The breakthrough came when we realized that Corvani energy manipulation works on quantum principles we've been theorizing about for decades. Combined with human intuitive engineering, We've created weapons that can punch through Dracari armor like it's paper. Theoretical weapons, Director Petrov pointed out. We haven't tested them against actual Dracari technology. Zarathek's scales shifted to the deep green of memory. I've seen Dracari ships absorb the combined fire of 12 Corvani battle cruisers without significant damage. Their armor is adaptive and regenerative. That's where human unconventional thinking comes in, Dr. Okafor explained. Instead of trying to overpower their defenses, we're using weapons that phase shift through different dimensional frequencies. The armor can't adapt to attacks it can't detect. Admiral Chen studied the tactical displays. What about our intelligence on their fleet composition? Commander Liu from Earth's Intelligence Division stood. Corvani refugees from other systems have provided detailed information about Dracari tactics and ship capabilities. They always attack in the same formation, relying on overwhelming firepower rather than strategy. They've never needed strategy, explained Kethmore, the elderly Corvani who had become an unofficial ambassador. For 200 years, no species has been able to mount effective resistance. They've grown arrogant. Good, Admiral Chun said grimly. Arrogance can be exploited. What about our evacuation plans? The mood in the room darkened. President Williams from the African Federation spoke carefully. Civilian populations in major cities have been moved to underground shelters. Critical infrastructure has been hardened or moved underground. But if we fail, we won't fail, Admiral Chun said firmly. Because failure isn't an option. Dr. Martinez entered the war room, still wearing medical scrubs. Over the past 2 weeks, she had become the bridge between human and Corvani civilian populations, coordinating everything from medical care to cultural integration. How are the combined training exercises going? Admiral Chen asked her. Better than expected, she replied. Human and Corvani pilots are developing tactics that neither species could use alone. The Corvani's four-armed coordination allows them to manage complex flight patterns while humans handle weapons systems and tactical decisions. She brought up recordings of the joint training missions. Mixed crews are outperforming single-species teams by significant margins. The Dracari won't expect this level of coordination between species they've never seen working together. Zarathek watched the training footage with growing amazement. Human and Corvani pilots moved in perfect synchronization, their ships dancing through complex maneuvers that would have been impossible for either species alone. Your people learn faster than any species we've encountered, she told Admiral Chen. It usually takes decades for species to develop joint military operations. You've done it in 2 weeks. When the stakes are this high, everyone finds motivation they didn't know they had, Admiral Chen replied. The war room's main display suddenly shifted to show long-range sensor data. A technician called out, Admiral, we're detecting the Dracari scout fleet returning. They're broadcasting a message. Put it through. The screen filled with the image of a Dracari commander. The alien was tall and angular, with metallic skin and eyes like burning coals. When it spoke, its voice was mechanical and cold. Primitive humans of the third planet. You harbor criminals of the Corvani species who are condemned to death for crimes against the Dracari Empire. You will surrender these criminals immediately or face the consequences of defying imperial will. Admiral Chen stepped forward, his expression calm but determined. This is Admiral Chun of the United Earth Defense Forces. The Corvani are our allies and friends. They will not be surrendered. The Dracari commander's expression didn't change. Your species is unknown to imperial records. You will be given one opportunity to reconsider your defiance. The Dracari Armada will arrive in 72 hours. Surrender the criminals or watch your world burn. 72 hours, Admiral Chun repeated after the transmission ended. That's less time than we expected. They're moving faster than usual, Zarathek observed. They must be confident that a single armada can handle both species. Chief Engineer Thompson grinned. Then, they're in for quite a surprise. The final 3 days of preparation transformed the solar system into a fortress unlike anything ever seen. Human industrial capacity, enhanced by Corvani technology, produced miracles of engineering at unprecedented speed. Luna Station expanded into a massive military complex bristling with defensive weapons. Asteroid mining platforms were converted into hidden weapons bases. The space around Earth filled with orbital defense satellites that could coordinate their fire with devastating precision. But the most impressive achievement was the fleet itself. The human Corvani hybrid ships were sleek and deadly, combining the best of both species' technologies. They were faster than pure human designs, more maneuverable than Corvani ships, and armed with weapons that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Admiral Chun toured the flagship Unity on the final day before the battle. The ship was a collaboration between species that showed what could be accomplished when different forms of intelligence worked together instead of fighting. Captain Sarah Park, the ship's human commander, met him at the airlock. "Admiral, I'd like you to meet my executive officer." A Corvani officer stepped forward, her scales the deep blue of formal greeting. "Commander Tessera, sir. It's an honor to serve aboard this vessel." "The honor is ours, Commander," Admiral Chun replied. "How are the joint crews performing?" "Like they've been working together for years," Captain Park answered. The learning curve was steep, but the results speak for themselves. They walked through the ship's corridors, which had been designed to accommodate both human and Corvani physiology. The integration was seamless, as if the two species had always been meant to work together. In the ship's main tactical center, human and Corvani officers worked side by side, their different approaches to problem-solving creating solutions neither could have achieved alone. The Corvani's methodical analysis combined with human intuition produced tactical innovations that were both elegant and effective. "What's our battle plan?" Admiral Chen asked. Captain Park activated the holographic display. "We'll use the Dracary's arrogance against them. They'll expect us to cluster around Earth in a defensive formation. Instead, we're going to meet them at the edge of the system." "That seems risky," Admiral Chen observed. Commander Tessera explained the Corvani perspective. Dracary tactics rely on overwhelming local superiority. They concentrate their entire fleet to destroy enemy forces piecemeal. But their ships aren't designed for the kind of mobile warfare we're planning. Human hit-and-run tactics, Captain Park continued, combined with Corvani precision targeting. "We'll hit them hard and fast, then fade away before they can concentrate their fire. And if they break through to Earth?" "They won't," both officers said simultaneously, then looked at each other with the kind of confidence that only came from perfect understanding. As they toured the ship's engineering sections, Admiral Chun was amazed by the level of integration. Human engineers worked with Corvani technicians as if they shared a common language, which in many ways they did. The language of problem-solving transcended species barriers. "Sir," called out Engineer Rodriguez, a young woman who had become an expert in Corvani power systems. "Would you like to see the new weapons array?" The ship's primary armament was unlike anything that had existed before. Corvani energy-focusing technology channeled power from human fusion reactors through crystalline matrices that could shift the fundamental properties of the energy beam. "How much firepower are we talking about?" Admiral Chen asked. "Each ship can punch through a Dracary battlecruiser's shields with a single focused burst," Rodriguez explained proudly. "But the really impressive part is the targeting system." She brought up a simulation showing the ship's weapons in action. Corvani targeting computers can track hundreds of targets simultaneously. Human tactical software can predict enemy movements and adjust for evasive action. Together, they create a targeting solution that's practically precognitive. That evening, Admiral Chun held a final meeting with all ship commanders, both human and Corvani. The assembled captains represented the first truly integrated space fleet in galactic history. "Tomorrow, we face an enemy that has terrorized the galaxy for centuries," Admiral Chun began. "They believe that superior firepower makes them invincible. They believe that fear and intimidation can overcome any opposition." He looked around the room at the faces of both species. "They've never faced an alliance like ours. They've never encountered weapons they can't understand or tactics they can't predict. Most importantly, they've never fought an enemy that refuses to be intimidated." Captain Yamamoto of the destroyer Harmony raised her hand. "Admiral, what if we lose? What if our weapons aren't enough? Then, we'll have shown the galaxy that someone was willing to stand up to them," Admiral Chun replied. "And others will follow our example." Commander Veltar of the Corvani ship New Dawn spoke up. "In our culture, we have a saying, 'The tree that bends in the storm survives, but the tree that stands firm protects all who shelter beneath it.' Today, humanity chooses to stand firm. And the Corvani stand with you," added Captain Zurathek, who had insisted on commanding her repaired ship in the coming battle. The meeting continued past midnight as commanders refined their tactics and coordinated their approaches. The complexity of managing a multi-species fleet should have been overwhelming, but somehow it worked. The shared purpose of protecting their new alliance overcame every obstacle. As dawn broke over Earth, the final preparations were complete. The human Corvani fleet took position at the edge of the solar system while defensive installations powered up their weapons. Citizens of both species watched the skies, knowing that the next few hours would determine the future of their worlds. In the command center of Luna Station, Admiral Chun watched the tactical displays with Zarathek beside him. The Corvani captain had become more than an ally. She was a friend whose courage had inspired an entire planet. Nervous? She asked him. Admiral Chun considered the question. Terrified, he admitted, but also proud. Whatever happens today, we've shown that different species can become family. The Dracari will never understand that, Zarathek observed. Their empire is built on domination and fear. They cannot comprehend cooperation between equals. Then, that will be their weakness, Admiral Chun replied. At precisely 1,400 hours Earth Standard Time, long-range sensors detected the arrival of the Dracari Armada. 120 ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls dark against the stars. The largest vessel, the dreadnought Imperial Vengeance, transmitted a final ultimatum: surrender the Corvani criminals or face annihilation. Admiral Chin's response was broadcast throughout the solar system and transmitted to every ship in both fleets. The Corvani are under the protection of the United Earth Defense Forces. If you want them, you'll have to go through us. The die was cast. The first truly integrated human-alien alliance in Earth's history was about to face its ultimate test against an enemy that had conquered half the galaxy. As alarms sounded throughout the fleet and weapons systems powered up to full capacity, Admiral Chun felt a strange calm settle over him. Win or lose, they had chosen to stand for something greater than their own survival. They had chosen to stand for the idea that intelligence and compassion could triumph over brutality and conquest. Today, they would discover if that idea was strong enough to change the galaxy. The Dracari Armada advanced through space like a moving constellation of death. Admiral Chun watched from the bridge of the Unity as long-range sensors tracked the enemy fleet's approach. 120 ships in perfect formation, their dark hulls absorbing light like hungry shadows. All ships report ready, announced Commander Okafor from the communications station. Human and Corvani crews are synchronized and standing by. Admiral Chun nodded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The enemy fleet was still 6 hours away at their current speed, giving him time for final preparations. But, more importantly, it gave him time to study their formation and confirm what Corvani intelligence had told them about Dracari tactics. They're not even trying to be subtle, observed Captain Park from her position at the tactical console. Same formation they've used for 2 centuries. Commander Tessera's scales shifted to the yellow of analytical focus. The Dracari see no need for innovation when overwhelming force has always succeeded. Their battle cruisers will form the center line, destroyers on the flanks, support ships in reserve. Which means they're not expecting any surprises, Admiral Chun concluded. Good. We'll give them plenty. The joint human Corvani fleet was positioned in 3 groups throughout the outer system. The largest concentration, 40 ships led by Admiral Chun himself, waited near Jupiter's orbit. 2 smaller squadrons hid in the asteroid belt and among Saturn's rings, ready to strike the Dracari flanks when the time came. Signal from Luna Command, reported Lieutenant Kim. All defensive installations are online and ready. Admiral Chun activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, this is Admiral Chun. In 5 hours, we'll engage an enemy that has terrorized the galaxy for centuries. They expect us to cower before their might. They expect us to surrender our friends to save ourselves. He paused, looking around the bridge at the mix of human and Corvani faces. They don't understand what they're facing. They've never encountered an alliance built on mutual respect instead of conquest. They've never fought an enemy that values freedom more than safety. The channel crackled with responses from across the fleet. Ship after ship acknowledged the message, their crews ready for the fight of their lives. Remember, Admiral Chun continued, we're not just defending Earth and the Corvani refugees. We're defending the idea that different species can work together as equals. We're showing the galaxy that tyranny doesn't have to win. As the hours passed, the tension aboard every ship grew steadily. But it wasn't the paralyzing fear that the Dracari counted on. It was the focused intensity of people who knew they were fighting for something precious. Dr. Martinez, who had insisted on staying aboard the Unity as medical officer, made rounds to check on the crew. She found humans and Corvani working together with an efficiency that should have taken years to develop. How are you holding up? She asked Engineer Rodriguez, who was monitoring the ship's hybrid power systems alongside a Corvani technician named Morvan. Like we were born to do this, Rodriguez replied. not taking her eyes off her instruments. It's weird how natural it feels to work with alien technology. Morven's scales rippled with amusement. Perhaps because it's not truly alien anymore. Your species and ours think differently, but we both understand the beauty of a system that works perfectly. Dr. Martinez smiled. In just 3 weeks, she had watched 2 species learn to communicate, collaborate, and trust each other completely. If they survived the coming battle, the alliance between humans and Corvani could become something unprecedented in galactic history. On the bridge, Admiral Chun received regular updates from his squadron commanders. The fleet was as ready as they could make it, but he knew that no amount of preparation could eliminate the terrible reality they faced. "Admiral," said Commander Tessera quietly, "I want you to know that whatever happens today, the Corvani will never forget what your species has done for us. And if we all die together, then we'll have died as free beings defending our friends." That's more than any Corvani has been able to say for 2 years. Admiral Chen nodded, understanding the weight behind her words. The Corvani had been running and hiding for so long that they had almost forgotten what it meant to stand and fight. "Sensor contact," called out Lieutenant Park suddenly. "Dracari fleet is decelerating. They'll be in weapons range in 30 minutes. All stations, battle ready," Admiral Chen commanded. "Signal all ships to prepare for combat." The bridge transformed from a place of nervous waiting into a center of controlled urgency. Weapons systems powered up, defensive screens activated, and tactical computers began calculating firing solutions for targets still hours away. "They're hailing us," reported the communications officer. "Put them through." The main viewer filled with the image of Dracari's Supreme Commander Kralthek, his metallic features twisted with disdain. When he spoke, his voice carried the arrogance of absolute power. "I am Supreme Commander Kralthek of the Dracari Empire. You command a pathetic collection of primitive vessels and criminal refugees. Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be swift." Admiral Chen stepped forward, his bearing calm and professional. "I am Admiral Chun of the United Earth Defense Forces. The beings you call criminals are our allies and friends. If you want them, you'll have to destroy us first." The Dracari commander's laugh was like grinding metal. "Your tiny fleet against the might of the Empire? You will be swept aside like dust before a storm." "We'll see," Admiral Chun replied simply, and closed the channel. Commander Tessera's scales had shifted to the deep red of battle readiness. In all the records of Dracari conquest, no one has ever spoken to their commanders like that. "There's a first time for everything," Admiral Chun said grimly. The Dracari fleet reached optimal firing range exactly on schedule. Their ships formed the classic Imperial attack formation, 30 massive battle cruisers in the center, flanked by 60 destroyers, with 30 support ships trailing behind. "They're so confident they're not even scanning for hidden forces," observed Captain Park. "Our ships in the asteroid belt and Saturn's rings are completely undetected. Signal Squadron 2 and 3 to hold position until my command," Admiral Chun ordered. "We need to draw them deeper into the system before we spring the trap." The first exchange of fire came suddenly. The Dracari battle cruisers opened up with their primary weapons, sending massive energy beams racing across space toward the human Corvani fleet. But Admiral Chen's ships were already moving, their hybrid engines allowing for acceleration patterns no single species could achieve. "Evasive pattern Delta," Admiral Chen commanded. "Return fire with precision targeting." The joint fleet scattered like a school of fish, each ship following a seemingly random path that was actually part of a complex three-dimensional dance. Dracari weapons, designed to overwhelm stationary or predictably moving targets, found empty space where enemy ships should have been. Meanwhile, the human Corvani hybrid weapons began their work. Beams of energy that shifted frequency mid-flight punched through Dracari's shields like they weren't there. Corvani targeting computers, enhanced by human tactical software, achieved hit rates that should have been impossible at such extreme range. "Direct hit on the battle cruiser Death's Herald," reported Lieutenant Park. "Their shield generators are overloading." "Confirmed kill on destroyer Iron Claw," added another tactical officer. "Their hull integrity is failing." Commander Kralthek's voice erupted from the communications system, no longer calm and arrogant. "What weapons are these? How are you penetrating our shields?" Admiral Chen didn't bother to respond. Instead, he watched as his carefully planned tactics began to unfold. The Dracari, faced with an enemy they couldn't easily destroy, did exactly what Corvani intelligence said they would do. They concentrated their forces and charged forward. "All ships, implement withdrawal pattern Charlie," Admiral Chen commanded. Let them chase us deeper into the system. The human Corvani fleet began what appeared to be a fighting retreat, their ships falling back toward Jupiter while maintaining a deadly rain of fire on the pursuing Dracari. But it wasn't really a retreat. It was bait. The Dracari fleet, frustrated by their inability to bring their superior firepower to bear, accelerated their pursuit. Their tight formation began to stretch as faster ships pulled ahead of their slower companions. They're taking the bait, Captain Park observed with satisfaction. The formation is breaking apart. Signal Squadron 2, Admiral Chen commanded. Execute flanking maneuver Alpha. From their hiding place in the asteroid belt, 30 human Corvani ships emerged like hunting predators. They struck the Dracari fleet's right flank with coordinated precision, their hybrid weapons tearing through enemy shields and armor. The surprise was complete. Dracari destroyers that had been focusing on the retreating fleet ahead suddenly found themselves under attack from an unexpected direction. Several ships exploded before they could even return fire. Squadron 3, execute flanking maneuver Beta, Admiral Chen continued. The Saturn squadron struck the left flank simultaneously, creating chaos in the Dracari ranks. What had been an organized pursuit became a confused melee as enemy ships tried to respond to attacks from 3 directions at once. But Admiral Chen's greatest surprise was still to come. All ships, execute convergence pattern Omega, he commanded. Instead of continuing their retreat, the main human Corvani fleet suddenly reversed course and charged directly toward the Dracari center. At the same time, the 2 flanking squadrons adjusted their attacks to drive enemy ships toward the center of the formation. The result was devastating. Dracari ships found themselves trapped in a shrinking pocket of space, unable to maneuver effectively while under attack from all sides. Their superior firepower became a liability as ships risked hitting their own allies if they fired indiscriminately. This is impossible. Commander Kralthek's voice raged across the communications channel. You're primitives. How are you defeating Imperial tactics? This time Admiral Chen did respond. Because your tactics assume that different species can't work together. You've never faced an alliance of equals. The battle raged for 6 hours, but the outcome was decided in the first 30 minutes. The Dracari, for all their technological superiority, had never learned to adapt their tactics. They had conquered through overwhelming force for so long that they had forgotten how to fight a truly innovative enemy. Human intuition and flexibility combined with Corvani precision and patience created tactical solutions that neither species could have achieved alone. Every ship in the joint fleet fought as part of a coordinated whole, their crews working together as if they had trained for years instead of weeks. By the time the surviving Dracari ships attempted to retreat, it was too late. The human Corvani fleet had positioned itself to control every escape route from the battlefield. Enemy flagship is signaling surrender, reported the communications officer, disbelief clear in her voice. Admiral Chen looked around the bridge at the faces of his crew. Humans and Corvani alike wore expressions of shocked amazement. They had actually done it. They had defeated the supposedly invincible Dracari armada. Put them through, Admiral Chen commanded. Commander Kralthek appeared on the main screen, his metallic features showing an emotion that no Dracari had experienced in centuries, fear. We surrender, he said slowly. The Imperial Armada yields to your forces. Will you guarantee safe passage for the Corvani refugees? Admiral Chen asked. Yes, the Empire will not pursue them further. And will you carry a message back to your Empire? Kralthek nodded reluctantly. Admiral Chen's next words were broadcast to every ship in both fleets and recorded for transmission throughout the galaxy. Tell your Empire that the age of conquest through fear is ending. Tell them that species are beginning to work together instead of preying on each other. And tell them that anyone who threatens our friends will find us waiting. As the battered remnants of the Dracari fleet limped away into hyperspace, Admiral Chen turned to Commander Tessera. Well, Commander, how does it feel to be part of the first alliance to defeat the Dracari Empire? Her scales shifted through a rainbow of colors expressing emotions that had no human equivalent. It feels like the beginning of something wonderful, she replied. Dr. Martinez, who had monitored the battle from the medical bay while treating wounded from both species, joined them on the bridge. Casualties? Admiral Chen asked. Surprisingly light, she reported. The hybrid defensive systems worked better than we expected. We lost 3 ships, but most of the crews were evacuated. And the Dracari? 73 ships destroyed, 21 disabled, 26 surrendered. Dr. Martinez shook her head in amazement. A fleet that was supposed to be invincible just suffered the worst defeat in their history. As news of the victory spread throughout the solar system and beyond, Admiral Chen realized that they had accomplished something far more important than a military victory. They had proved that cooperation could triumph over conquest, that different species could become family, and that the galaxy's future didn't have to be shaped by fear. The alliance between humans and Corvani was just the beginning. Other species who had suffered under Dracari tyranny would hear about this battle and find new hope. The galaxy was about to discover that the Age of Empire was ending, and the Age of Alliance was about to begin. 3 months after the Battle of Sol, the solar system had transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. What began as a desperate defense against the Dracari Armada had evolved into the foundation of the first truly cooperative interstellar alliance. Admiral Chen stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Station, watching construction crews from a dozen different species work together to build what would become the galaxy's first integrated shipyard. Humans, Corvani, and the newest arrivals worked side by side, their different approaches to engineering creating vessels that surpassed anything any single species had ever built. The Zilithian engineering teams are remarkable, observed Dr. Martinez, who had become the director of interspecies relations. Their biomechanical integration techniques are unlike anything we've seen. She gestured toward a section of the shipyard where tall, graceful beings with chitinous exoskeletons worked alongside human engineers. The Zilithians had arrived 2 weeks ago, refugees from their own encounter with Dracari expansion. Like the Corvani before them, they had sought sanctuary and found something far greater. How many species have requested asylum now? Admiral Chen asked. 17 confirmed, with delegations from 6 more on their way, Dr. Martinez replied. Word of our victory is spreading faster than we can manage the influx. Commander Tessera joined them at the observation window. Her scales had taken on the deep blue of contentment, a color she had rarely shown during her people's long flight from the Dracari. The Corvani Council has voted unanimously to make our alliance with humanity permanent, she announced. We're not refugees anymore. We're partners in building something the galaxy has never seen. Admiral Chen nodded, though his expression remained thoughtful. The question is whether we can manage this growth responsibly. Every new species brings new challenges. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Zarathek, who now commanded the integrated patrol fleet responsible for system security. Her uniform bore the insignia of both the Corvani Defense Force and the United Earthspace Command, symbols that had become interchangeable in the months since the battle. Admiral, we have a situation, she reported. Long-range sensors have detected a massive fleet approaching the edge of our territory. It's not Dracari, but the configuration is unusual. How massive? Admiral Chen asked. Over 300 ships, but they're not in battle formation. They're sending diplomatic frequencies and requesting permission to approach. Dr. Martinez raised an eyebrow. 300 ships for a diplomatic mission? That's either a very large delegation or a very polite invasion. We're about to find out, Admiral Chen replied. Signal the fleet to yellow alert and prepare to receive a delegation. But keep our defensive installations ready. An hour later, the main conference room of Harmony Station hosted the most diverse gathering in known galactic history. Representatives from 15 species sat around a circular table designed to accommodate vastly different physiologies. Translators worked overtime to manage the complex mix of languages, while cultural liaisons helped navigate the intricate protocols of interspecies diplomacy. The leader of the incoming delegation was unlike anything they had encountered. Ambassador Velnoth of the Consortium of Free Worlds stood nearly 3 meters tall, his crystalline skin refracting light in patterns that seemed to change with his emotional state. His voice, when filtered through the translation matrix, carried harmonics that suggested vast age and wisdom. Admiral Chen, Dr. Martinez, honored representatives of the Human Corvani Alliance. Velnoth began, his crystalline features shifting to what their xenobiologists had identified as formal respect. I bring greetings from 47 worlds that have heard of your victory against the Dracari Empire. 47 worlds? Admiral Chen repeated. Are you saying there's been organized resistance to the Dracari that we didn't know about? Not organized, precisely, Velnoth explained. Until recently, each species fought alone, believing they were the only ones who dared resist imperial expansion. But news of your victory has changed everything. He activated a holographic display that filled the center of the conference table. The image showed a three-dimensional map of local galactic space, with hundreds of star systems marked in various colors. Red systems are under direct Dracari control, Velnoth explained. Yellow systems are tribute states that maintain nominal independence. Green systems are those that have successfully resisted Dracari expansion. Dr. Martinez studied the display in amazement. There are more green systems than red ones. The Dracari don't control as much territory as we thought. The Empire's strength has always been in propaganda as much as military might, agreed Kethmore, the elderly Corvani who had become an informal historian of galactic politics. They convinced everyone that resistance was futile, so most species never tried to unite against them. Velnotha's crystalline skin shifted to patterns of cautious optimism. Your alliance has proven that different species can not only coexist, but thrive together. More importantly, you've shown that the Dracari can be defeated by coordinated resistance. What exactly are you proposing? Admiral Chen asked. A formal alliance between the Consortium of Free Worlds and your human Corvani partnership. Shared technology, coordinated defense, and, most importantly, a united front against Imperial expansion. Commander Tessera leaned forward. What would membership in this larger alliance mean for species autonomy? The Corvani have no desire to escape one form of domination only to submit to another. Each member species retains complete internal autonomy, Velnoth assured her. The consortium exists only for mutual defense and voluntary cooperation. No species is required to adopt another's customs, technology, or political system. Captain Zarathek, who had been silent throughout the discussion, finally spoke. And what about species that want to leave the alliance? Are they free to go? Absolutely. The consortium has had 17 species join, and 3 choose to leave over the past century. All departures were peaceful and amicable. Dr. Martinez exchanged glances with Admiral Chun. This was the opportunity they had hoped for but hadn't dared to expect. A chance to expand their alliance beyond the desperate circumstances that had created it. We'll need to discuss this with our respective governments, Admiral Chun said carefully. But, speaking personally, the idea of a voluntary alliance of free species is exactly what we've been working toward. The negotiations continued for 3 days, with experts from dozens of species working to hammer out the details of what would become known as the Charter of Free Worlds. The document that emerged was unlike any treaty in galactic history, prioritizing cooperation over control and emphasizing shared values rather than shared rulers. On the final day of negotiations, Admiral Chen stood before the assembled delegates to address concerns that had emerged during the discussions. Some of you have asked whether humanity can be trusted not to seek dominance over this alliance, he began. I can only point to our actions since the Battle of Sol. When we had the opportunity to claim leadership over the Corvani refugees, we chose partnership instead. When other species arrived seeking help, we offered them equality rather than subjugation. He gestured toward the observation windows, where the massive construction project continued around the clock. Look around you. Humans, Corvani, Zilithians, and a dozen other species working together to build something none of us could create alone. This isn't human expansion disguised as cooperation. This is genuine alliance between equals. Ambassador Velnotha's crystalline features shifted to deep satisfaction. That is precisely why the consortium voted to approach you. Your species' actions speak louder than any diplomatic promises. The signing ceremony took place in the main assembly hall of Harmony Station, with representatives from 53 species witnessing the birth of what historians would later call the Second Galactic Republic. Unlike the First Republic, which had fallen to internal corruption centuries ago, this alliance was built on voluntary participation and mutual respect. As Admiral Chun affixed his signature to the Charter of Free Worlds, he reflected on how far they had come in just 4 months. What began as a desperate attempt to protect 40,000 refugees had become the foundation for galactic transformation. But, even as they celebrated this diplomatic triumph, Admiral Chen knew that their greatest challenges lay ahead. The Dracari Empire would not accept the loss of their territorial ambitions quietly, and there were other powers in the galaxy that viewed the new alliance with suspicion or hostility. Dr. Martinez approached him as the ceremony concluded. Any regrets about turning humanity into the center of galactic politics? Admiral Chen smiled. My only regret is that it took a crisis to bring us together. Imagine what we might have accomplished if we'd found each other under peaceful circumstances. Well, we have time to find out, Dr. Martinez replied. The consortium's intelligence reports suggest the Dracari are pulling back from several frontier systems to consolidate their core territories. We might have bought ourselves years to build this alliance properly. Captain Zarathek joined their conversation, her scales showing the golden color of deep satisfaction. Admiral, I wanted to thank you again for what your species has done for mine. When we arrived here, we were broken refugees with no hope for the future. Now we're part of something that might change the entire galaxy. The thanks go both ways, Captain. Without Corvani technology and expertise, we never could have defeated the Dracari. And, without that victory, none of this would be possible. As they spoke, young representatives from the newest member species approached them with questions about alliance protocols, technology sharing agreements, and cultural exchange programs. Admiral Chen found himself amazed by the enthusiasm and hope these beings showed for their shared future. Later that evening, Admiral Chen stood alone in his quarters aboard Harmony Station, looking out at the bustling activity in the shipyard. Construction crews worked around the clock to build vessels that would patrol Alliance space, protecting trade routes, and ensuring that no species would face extinction alone. The door chimed, and Commander Tessera entered with a data pad in her hands. The latest reports from our intelligence network, she announced. The Dracari have recalled 3 armadas from frontier operations. They're definitely consolidating their forces. Preparing for a major offensive? Admiral Chen asked. Possibly. Or they might be dealing with internal problems. Several consortium spies report unusual activity in core Imperial systems. Admiral Chen studied the intelligence reports with growing interest. What kind of unusual activity? Ships moving without military escort, civilian evacuations from industrial centers, and, most interesting of all, several species within the Empire have started broadcasting requests for alliance protection. You mean some of their subject species are rebelling? It's more complex than that, Tessera explained. The Dracari rule through fear and overwhelming force, but they've never really integrated their conquered territories. Most subject species maintain their own governments and military forces under Imperial oversight. She highlighted several star systems on the display. These species have sent secret envoys asking about asylum or alliance membership. If even a few Imperial subjects defect to our side, it could trigger a cascade of defections. Admiral Chen felt a mix of excitement and concern. That would be wonderful for the oppressed species, but it might also provoke the Dracari into more aggressive action. True, but consider the alternative. If we don't offer hope to Imperial subjects, they'll remain trapped under Dracari rule indefinitely. The alliance was built on the principle that intelligent beings have the right to determine their own fate. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. You're right, of course. We can't claim to stand for freedom while ignoring those who ask for our help. He activated his communication console and sent a priority message to the Alliance Council. Within an hour, representatives from across the Alliance were debating the complex moral and strategic questions raised by Imperial defections. The debate lasted through the night, with passionate arguments on all sides. Some representatives feared that accepting Imperial refugees would provoke a war the Alliance wasn't ready for. Others argued that refusing to help would betray everything they stood for. In the end, it was Kethmore who provided the decisive argument. The elderly Corvani stood slowly, his silver scales reflecting the chamber's lights. My friends, he said, his voice carrying the weight of long experience. We faced the same choice that Admiral Chen's species faced when our ships first arrived in their system. We can choose safety and turn away those who seek help, or we can choose principle and accept the risks that come with doing what's right. He looked around the chamber at the faces of 53 species. The Dracari count on our fear, our willingness to abandon others to save ourselves. If we make that choice now, we become complicit in their tyranny. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. The Alliance of Free Worlds would accept any Imperial subject that requested asylum, regardless of the consequences. As dawn broke over Earth, Admiral Chen realized that they had passed the point of no return. The Alliance was no longer just a defensive arrangement between refugees and their protectors. It had become a beacon of hope for oppressed beings throughout the galaxy. The Dracari Empire had maintained control through isolation and despair, convincing each species that they stood alone against impossible odds. But that era was ending. Word of the Alliance spread through secret channels and hidden networks, carrying a message that no empire had heard in centuries. You are not alone. Help is coming. The Age of Freedom has begun. 2 years after the founding of the Alliance of Free Worlds, the galaxy stood on the brink of transformation. What had begun with 40,000 Corvani refugees seeking sanctuary had become a movement encompassing over 200 species across 3 spiral arms. Admiral Chun, now Supreme Commander of Alliance Forces, stood in the Strategic Command Center of Titan Base, humanity's most advanced military installation. The holographic display before him showed the current state of galactic politics in stark detail. Green zones indicated Alliance territory, red showed remaining Dracari holdings, and an alarming number of yellow markers represented systems in active rebellion against Imperial rule. Status report. He requested from his senior staff, a group that now included representatives from 20 different species. General Velnara of the Zalithian Defense Corps stepped forward, her chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the command center's lights. Alliance Fleet Operations reports successful evacuation of the hegemony refugees from the Vega system. 700,000 civilians are now safely in Alliance space. Dracari response. Admiral Chen asked. Minimal, replied Commander Tessera, whose role had expanded to Alliance Intelligence Coordinator. They seem to be conserving their forces for something bigger. Captain Zarathek, now commanding Alliance Rapid Response Fleet, added her own observations. Our patrol squadrons report increased Dracari activity along the Rim territories. They're pulling ships from frontier systems and concentrating them in core Imperial space. Dr. Martinez, whose title had evolved to Director of Galactic Integration, joined the briefing with data that had become increasingly important to Alliance planning. Cultural integration remains our biggest challenge, she announced. We now have over 200 member species, each with their own customs, biological needs, and technological approaches. The logistics of managing this diversity are becoming overwhelming. Admiral Chen nodded thoughtfully. The Alliance's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness. The incredible diversity of member species provided unmatched technological innovation and tactical flexibility, but it also created coordination challenges that no one had anticipated. What's our current military situation? He asked. General Velnara activated a tactical display showing Alliance fleet positions throughout known space. We have 43 full battle groups deployed across Alliance territory, with rapid response squadrons stationed at key transit points. Total ship count is approaching 15,000 vessels. And the Dracari? Intelligence estimates their remaining fleet strength at approximately 8,000 ships, Commander Tessera reported. But they're concentrated in heavily fortified core systems. Any assault on Imperial Heartland would be extremely costly. Captain Zarathek added a crucial detail. More importantly, our intelligence networks report that at least 40 Imperial subject species are in secret communication with Alliance representatives. If they defect simultaneously, the Empire could collapse overnight, Admiral Chen finished. But it could also trigger the most destructive war in galactic history if the Dracari decide to fight to the last ship. Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Deep Space Monitoring Station. Lieutenant Commander Park's voice carried a tension that made everyone in the room pay immediate attention. Admiral Chun, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Dracari homeworld. They're requesting direct communication with Alliance leadership. Admiral Chun exchanged glances with his staff. In 2 years of conflict, the Dracari had never initiated diplomatic contact. Put them through, he ordered. The main display shifted to show a figure that none of them had expected to see. Instead of the familiar angular features of a Dracari military commander, they were looking at an elderly alien with soft, scaled features and for arms that immediately identified him as Corvani. I am former Prime Minister Krelthon of the Corvani Republic, the figure announced. I speak for a coalition of Imperial subject governments that has taken control of the Dracari homeworld. The silence in the command center was absolute. Admiral Chen felt his mind reeling as he tried to process what he was hearing. Prime Minister, he said carefully, are you telling us that Imperial subjects have overthrown the Dracari government? Not overthrown, Krelthon corrected. Replaced. 3 days ago, representatives from 67 subject species met in secret on the Imperial capital. We presented Emperor Drakmor with a simple choice. Accept transformation of the Empire into a voluntary confederation, or face simultaneous rebellion from every subject world. Commander Tessera's scales shifted through a rapid sequence of colors expressing emotions that had no human equivalent. And the Emperor agreed. He had no choice. Imperial military forces are 60% non-Dracari, drawn from subject species. When those forces declared loyalty to the new confederation rather than the Empire, resistance became impossible. Dr. Martinez leaned forward. What does this mean for current Imperial territory? And, more importantly, what does it mean for the ongoing conflicts? The Dracari Confederation, as it will be known, wishes to negotiate a peace treaty with the Alliance of Free Worlds. We propose to end all hostilities, establish trade agreements, and work together to ensure that no species is ever again forced to live under tyranny. Admiral Chen felt a cautious hope beginning to build. And the former Imperial military? The commanders who have spent centuries conquering other species. Many have accepted the new order. Those who refuse are being given the opportunity to relocate to colony worlds where they can maintain traditional Dracari culture without imposing it on others. No one will be forced to abandon their heritage, but no one will be allowed to dominate others. The implications were staggering. If this transformation was genuine, it would mean the end of the longest-running conflict in recorded galactic history. But Admiral Chun had learned to be cautious about offers that seemed too good to be true. Prime Minister, forgive my skepticism, but this is an enormous change to accept at face value. How can we be certain this isn't some kind of elaborate deception? Krelthon's expression showed understanding rather than offense. I would be suspicious in your position as well. Therefore, I propose that Alliance representatives visit the former Imperial capital to witness the transition firsthand. You will find that the 40 billion beings living on former Imperial worlds are no longer subjects. They are citizens of a confederation built on principles very similar to your own Alliance. Over the next month, Alliance diplomatic teams visited dozens of former Imperial worlds, documenting the most remarkable political transformation in galactic history. Species that had been subjects for centuries were establishing their own governments, forming trade partnerships, and working together to rebuild worlds that had been damaged by centuries of exploitation. Dr. Martinez led the main diplomatic mission to the former Imperial capital, now renamed Haven World. Her reports painted a picture of controlled chaos as hundreds of species worked to establish new governmental structures. It's actually working, she told Admiral Chun during one of their regular communications. The transition isn't perfect, and there are definitely tensions between former rulers and subjects, but the commitment to peaceful cooperation seems genuine. What about the Dracari themselves? How are they adapting to loss of power? Better than expected. Many of the younger generation are actually enthusiastic about the changes. They're tired of being seen as galactic villains and want the chance to contribute positively to interspecies relations. Admiral Chin found this hard to believe, but the evidence continued to support Dr. Martinez's observations. Former Dracari military officers were working alongside their former subjects to establish planetary defense forces. Dracari scientists were sharing technology that had been classified for centuries. Most remarkably, Dracari cultural leaders were participating in interspecies art exchanges and educational programs. The formal peace negotiations took place on Harmony Station, with representatives from the Alliance, the new Confederation, and several neutral species serving as mediators. Admiral Chin found himself sitting across from former Supreme Commander Kralthek, the same Dracari officer who had demanded surrender before the Battle of Seoul. Admiral, Kralthek said in carefully pronounced human speech, I owe you an apology. When we first met, I believed that might made right, and that superior force justified any action. I was wrong. What changed your mind? Admiral Chin asked, watching what you accomplished here. When the reports came back about your alliance, about species working together as equals, many of us began to question everything we had been taught. The idea that different species could cooperate rather than compete was revolutionary. Captain Zarathek, who was serving as a military advisor to the peace talks, looked directly at her former enemy. And the billions who died during Imperial expansion? Do you expect their families to simply forgive and forget? Kralthek's expression grew somber. No, forgiveness must be earned, not demanded. The Confederation has established truth and reconciliation committees on every former Imperial world. We're documenting our crimes and working to make whatever amends are possible. And if some species decide they can't forgive, if they want justice rather than reconciliation, then they have that right. The Confederation will cooperate fully with any war crimes tribunals or reparations proceedings. We cannot undo the past, but we can ensure it never happens again. The negotiations continued for 3 months, addressing everything from territorial boundaries to trade regulations to mutual defense agreements. The final treaty was unlike any document in galactic history, creating not just peace between former enemies, but a framework for ongoing cooperation. 1 year later, Admiral Chen stood once again in the observation deck of Harmony Station. But the view had changed dramatically. Instead of the frantic military preparations that had characterized the early days of the Alliance, he now watched peaceful merchant vessels from hundreds of species arriving and departing on regular schedules. Dr. Martinez joined him, carrying a data pad filled with statistics that would have seemed impossible just 3 years ago. Latest integration reports, she announced with satisfaction.